Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this for a second. Have you ever been in a room with a woman? She laughs at your jokes, remembers small things about you. Sometimes she feels close, sometimes distant, and yet nothing obvious ever happens? No flirting, no bold signals, no clear yes or no. And you're left wondering, am I imagining this, or is something actually there? Now listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you may bother you, but it might also explain years of confusion. Most men are taught to look for visible attraction, compliments, touch, attention, validation. But female attraction, especially fantasy-level attraction, rarely starts there. It starts quietly, internally, psychologically. And here's the uncomfortable truth. A woman can be deeply imagining you, replaying conversations, projecting scenarios, without ever giving you a single obvious sign. Why? Because fantasy doesn't require permission, and attraction doesn't need your awareness to grow. Now, before your mind jumps to extremes, pause. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about getting anything. This is about understanding how attraction actually forms, so you stop second-guessing yourself, blaming yourself, or chasing signals that were never meant to be loud. Psychological research consistently shows that women are more likely to experience attraction contextually through meaning, emotional safety, curiosity, and imagination long before physical expression ever shows up. Men externalize desire, women internalize it first. And this is where most men lose the plot. You assume, if she likes me, she'll show it. But in reality, when a woman is secretly fantasizing, she's often doing the opposite. She's observing, evaluating, protecting the fantasy itself. Let me put this in real-life terms. You're sitting next to her. She asks questions that feel slightly personal, but not invasive. She remembers something small you mentioned weeks ago. She reacts differently to you than to other men, but she never explains why. You tell yourself, she's probably just friendly. That assumption feels safe, but it's also why you miss what's actually happening. Here's the controversial part, and this is where I want your attention. A woman doesn't fantasize about men who try to impress her. She fantasizes about men who feel unresolved in her mind, men who create curiosity, men who don't rush clarity, men who don't need confirmation to stay grounded. And no one teaches you this. Instead, you're taught to perform, prove, chase, escalate, which ironically shuts down the very psychological space where fantasy lives. Now, I know some of you listening right now are thinking, then how am I supposed to know? Good question, because fantasy leaves traces, not loud ones, subtle ones, patterns, shifts, moments that feel small but don't fade. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the psychological signs most men overlook. Not because they're blind, but because they've never been trained to see attraction the way women experience it. This isn't about decoding every woman you meet. It's about understanding the invisible layer of interaction that decides whether attraction deepens or disappears. And here's what I want you to keep asking yourself as we go. What changes when I stop trying to be chosen and start being present? Because the moment you stop performing is often the moment fantasy begins. Now let's go to section 1. And this is where things get interesting. 1. She mentally includes you in her future, before you ever ask. Let me start with a question, and I want you to answer it honestly, not optimistically. Has a woman ever spoken to you in a way that quietly assumed you'd be around later? Not romantically, not directly, but casually. She says things like, "Next time you're here, you'd probably like this place. You remind me of someone I'd travel with." And then she changes the subject. Now, most men hear that and think nothing of it. Or worse, they think it means nothing because it wasn't flirtatious. But psychologically, this is one of the earliest and most ignored signs of internal attraction. Here's why. When a woman is fantasizing, especially secretly, she doesn't imagine you chasing her. She imagines shared experiences. Research in social psychology shows that women often bond through mental simulation, imagining scenarios that involve emotional continuity, not just physical proximity. Before desire becomes visible, it becomes narrative. In simple terms, she places you in her mental story of the future. And here's the part that trips men up. She does this before she knows if she wants anything to happen. It's exploratory, low risk, private, so she doesn't announce it. Instead, she slips you into conversations that point forward, plans, hypotheticals, shared references, and watches how you respond. Now ask yourself this carefully. Do you lean into it, or do you panic and try to lock it down? Because this is where most men accidentally kill the fantasy. When a man hears future-oriented language, he often responds with urgency. So when are we doing that? Oh, you mean together? Are you saying you like me? And suddenly, the mental space collapses. Fantasy requires room. Certainty suffocates it too early. A woman fantasizing about you isn't trying to start something yet. She's testing how it feels to imagine you there. And here's the subtle psychological signal most men miss. She's not asking if you'll be part of her future. She's watching whether you belong there naturally. Does your presence feel calm or needy, curious or demanding, grounded or anxious? Men with low self-esteem often think attraction must be confirmed verbally to be real. But female attraction often begins before words and disappears the moment it's forced into them. Let me make this very clear, because this is controversial. If a woman is mentally including you in her future, she doesn't want reassurance. She wants consistency. She wants to see that you don't rush ahead of her imagination, that you don't cling to a possibility, that you're comfortable letting things unfold. And this is why some men feel confused when women pull back. They didn't pull back because there was no attraction. They pulled back because the fantasy was interrupted. So here's the question I want you to sit with. When a woman subtly places you in her future, do you stay present or do you try to own it? Because the men women fantasize about don't grab the story. They fit into it. And that's where attraction quietly deepens, long before anyone admits anything out loud. 2. Her behavior changes when you're not trying to impress her. Let me ask you something that might feel uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed that the moment you stop trying so hard around a woman, she suddenly seems more attentive? She listens more closely. She asks better questions. She reacts more emotionally. And you're left thinking, wait, why now? Here's what most men get wrong. They believe attraction grows when they perform, when they're impressive, charming, confident on demand. But psychologically, fantasy doesn't form in response to performance. It forms in response to authenticity mixed with restraint. When a woman is secretly fantasizing about you, she is highly sensitive to who you are when you're not trying to win. This is where things flip. When you're relaxed, maybe quieter, less animated, less eager to please, she doesn't feel entertained. She feels curious. And curiosity is the doorway to imagination. Studies on interpersonal attraction show that unpredictability paired with emotional safety increases cognitive engagement. In plain language, when you stop selling yourself, her mind starts filling in the gaps. Now here's the subtle sign. When you're not trying to impress her, she often initiates more conversation, shares slightly more personal thoughts, holds eye contact longer, then looks away. First, reacts more strongly to small comments you make, not because you did something new, but because you removed pressure. And this is where men with low self-esteem sabotage themselves. They see her engagement increase and think, oh, I need to keep this going. So they ramp the effort back up. More jokes, more compliments, more availability. And suddenly, her energy cools. Why? Because fantasy requires space to grow. When you perform, you answer questions she hasn't finished asking yet. Let me say something that might challenge you. A woman doesn't fantasize about the man who tries to be unforgettable. She fantasizes about the man who feels real but unfinished. The man who isn't hiding, but isn't over-explaining either. And she notices this difference instinctively. When you stop trying to impress her, she starts testing. Does he stay grounded without attention? Does he still respect himself when I lean in? Does he seem centered or hungry? This isn't manipulation, it's subconscious evaluation. And here's the key psychological marker most men miss. If she becomes more expressive when you're more relaxed, she's not bored. She's mentally engaging. Her imagination is filling in who you are beyond the surface, and that's where fantasy lives. So I want you to reflect on this. Who are you when you don't need to be chosen? Because that version of you, the calm, present, unperforming one, is often the version a woman is quietly imagining. 3. She tests your confidence without you realizing it now. Listen closely, because this is where I'm going to be very honest with you. A lot of men say they want to understand women, but they avoid looking at how they react under subtle pressure. And when a woman is secretly fantasizing about you, she doesn't test you loudly, she tests you quietly. Here's the part most men don't like to hear. If a woman is imagining you in her world, she needs to know one thing before anything else. Does this man remain stable when he's uncertain? So she creates small moments of uncertainty, not to confuse you, to observe you. She might take longer to reply than usual. Disagree with you lightly in conversation. Pull back emotionally for a short moment. Mention another man casually without emphasis. And here's where the criticism comes in, because this is important. Many men fail this test without realizing they were being tested. They overreact. They seek reassurance. They change their behavior to regain control. They ask indirect questions. They become colder. Or they suddenly try harder. All of that communicates one thing. My confidence depends on your response. And fantasy doesn't survive there. Psychologically, women are drawn to emotional self-regulation. Research on attraction consistently shows that perceived confidence isn't about dominance. It's about emotional steadiness. In simple words, can you stay calm when nothing is confirmed? Now here's the hard truth I need you to hear. If a woman pulls back slightly and you immediately chase, she doesn't think, he likes me. She thinks, he's afraid of losing me. And fear kills fantasy. This isn't about being cold or distant. It's about not collapsing internally when certainty disappears. And I'm going to challenge you here, respectfully. Some of you confuse confidence with intensity. You think being direct, bold, or persistent proves strength. But real confidence is quieter. It's the ability to let silence exist, to let her moods shift without reacting, to remain the same man whether she's leaning in or pulling away. And here's the sign you're missing. If she creates small emotional gaps and watches how you respond, she's not disinterested. She's evaluating whether her imagination is safe with you. So here's your wake-up moment. Stop trying to pass tests you don't understand. Start becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to. Because the men women fantasize about don't fight for control. They hold their center. And that, more than any line, move, or strategy, is what keeps her thinking about you when you're not there. 4. She reacts emotionally to your absence, not your presence. Here's a question I want you to think about carefully. When you're around her, everything feels normal, comfortable, easy. But the moment you're not there, something shifts. She reaches out. She comments on something small. She suddenly becomes more expressive than she was face to face. And you wonder, why does she seem to feel me more when I'm gone? This is one of the most misunderstood psychological signs, and one of the clearest indicators of internal fantasy. When a woman is fantasizing, your physical presence isn't what activates attraction. Your absence does. Why? Because fantasy lives in the mind, not in the moment. Psychological studies on attachment and emotional processing show that women often process attraction after interaction, not during it. The meaning comes later, when the mind replays, reinterprets, and fills in emotional gaps. So when you leave, her imagination takes over. Now here's the mistake most men make. They think attraction should peak when they're present. So they try to create impact. Say the right thing, do the right thing, leave a strong impression. But if a woman is quietly fantasizing about you, she doesn't need stimulation. She needs space to reflect. And that's why she reacts more when you're gone. She might send a message referencing something you said earlier. React emotionally to your absence instead of commenting while you were there. Ask questions that continue a conversation that already ended. Seem warmer over text than in person. This confuses men, especially men who doubt themselves. They think, if she liked me, she'd be more expressive when I'm there. But fantasy doesn't perform on command. It grows in silence, in distance, in unresolved moments. And here's the key sign you need to notice. If she becomes more emotionally responsive after time apart, she's processing you internally, not ignoring you, not losing interest, imagining. Now let me be clear, because this matters. This doesn't mean you disappear or play games. It means you don't chase emotional reactions in real time. Men who rush to fill every gap prevent her mind from doing the work, and this is where calm masculine presence matters. You allow space without anxiety. You don't demand emotional proof. You let the connection breathe, and she notices that. Here's the psychological contrast. A man who needs constant feedback becomes forgettable. A man who leaves emotional residue becomes memorable. So ask yourself this honestly. Do you try to be felt while you're there? Or do you allow yourself to be felt when you're gone? Because when a woman reacts more to your absence than your presence, it's not indifference. It's imagination at work. 5. She subtly mirrors you while pretending she doesn't care. Now this last sign is quiet. So quiet that most men never notice it. And even when they do, they dismiss it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed a woman slowly picking up your words, your rhythm, your tone? Not all at once, not obviously, but over time. She starts using phrases you use. She matches your pace in conversation. She mirrors your energy, calm when you're calm, playful when you're playful. And yet, she never admits caring. Here's what's happening psychologically. Mirroring is one of the strongest subconscious indicators of attraction. Research in behavioral psychology shows that when someone mirrors another person's speech patterns, posture, or emotional tempo, it's often a sign of deep cognitive alignment. In simple terms, her nervous system is syncing with yours, and fantasy accelerates this. When a woman is secretly imagining you, she begins to internalize you. Not just your presence, but how it feels to be around you. So she practices that feeling. She unconsciously adopts your expressions. She aligns her reactions to yours. She matches your pauses, your humor, even your silence. But here's the twist, and this is why men miss it. She does it while acting indifferent. Why? Because fantasy is private. Admitting it too early would collapse it. So she mirrors quietly and watches. She's asking herself, do I feel safe being like him? Does matching him feel natural? Do I lose myself or feel more myself? And here's where men often sabotage this without knowing it. They notice the mirroring and immediately lean in harder. They try to escalate, they seek confirmation, and suddenly she pulls back, not because the attraction wasn't there, but because the moment became too exposed. Let me say this gently, but clearly. A woman who mirrors you while pretending not to care is not confused. She's protecting something internal. And the men she fantasizes about don't force clarity. They allow resonance. They stay steady. They don't call it out. They don't demand explanation. They let alignment speak for itself. So here's the final question for you before we close. When a woman begins to move like you, think like you, feel like you, do you rush to claim it? Or do you let it deepen? Because mirroring isn't flirting, it's integration. And by the time a woman mirrors you unconsciously, you're already living in her mind. Now let's bring this together, because the conclusion you're about to hear may challenge everything you've been taught.
Let me leave you with something that might sound uncomfortable, but it's true. Most men don't miss women's attraction because women hide it. They miss it because they're too busy trying to earn it. And that's the controversial truth no one tells you. A woman doesn't fantasize about a man who begs for clarity. She fantasizes about a man who is so grounded in himself that clarity becomes optional. If you take anything from this video, let it be this. Attraction is not a performance. Fantasy is not triggered by effort. And desire doesn't grow where insecurity demands proof. The signs we talked about today are subtle because fantasy is subtle. It lives in pauses, in restraint, in emotional steadiness. So if you've spent your life thinking, I'm doing everything right, why doesn't she see me? Maybe the real question is, why are you trying so hard to be seen? Confidence isn't loud, presence isn't desperate, and the men women think about when they're alone are rarely the ones chasing reassurance. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced one of these signs, but only realized it too late? Or maybe you're seeing them clearly now for the first time. Comment your experience below. I read them. And when something resonates deeply, I reach out, because this conversation matters. Not to manipulate, not to control, but to finally understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.